Welcome to a special help video on Kant's box and the terms inside of Kant's box. This is going to be very short. I'm just giving you this to help you with the exam. Some people missed it on the quizzes, and people oftentimes miss it on the exam, so I'm giving it to you now. Kant's box terms. This is a short explanation of the terms analytic and synthetic, and a priori and a posteriori. Okay, the first name that a proposition gets refers to the relationship between that proposition and logic. Okay, so that's the first name. It goes first name, last name. First name can either be analytic or synthetic. An analytic proposition is a proposition in which the means of formal logic are sufficient in order to determine if a proposition is true or false. Sufficient means it's enough. That's all you need. So if logic is all you need to know if a proposition is true or false, it is in the analytic box, or it's an analytic proposition. Synthetic propositions are a proposition in which the means of formal logic are necessary but not sufficient in order to determine if a proposition is true or false. So here, you need logic. It's necessary, but it's not enough. You need something else to determine if a proposition is true or false. So you got to have logic, but you need something else. The last name that a proposition gets is either a priori or a posteriori, and that last name refers to the relationship between that proposition and not observation, but observation. Okay, observation. Observation, see. Let's touch something there. Smell, hear, taste, or trying to do it. Touch, or get on reliable authority from someone who did. A priori propositions. A priori propositions are a proposition in which observation is not necessary in order to determine if it's true or false. So you don't have to see, smell, hear, taste, touch, or get on observation, or get from unreliable authority from someone who did. A posteriori propositions are those in which the means of those in which observation is necessary. You do have to observe it in order to determine if it's true or false. Okay, if you get confused, a priori, the word prior is in there. Think of it as you could know that prior to observing it. A posteriori, the word posterior is in there. That's the back end. Okay, on a ship, the posterior end of the ship is called the aft end or after end, and you can't know something until after you observe it. Okay, that's a posteriori. You can't know it until after you observe it. Okay, and the final slide for this very short video to help you with the exam, the 4 different types of terms and things about them. The first type of term we have is an analytic a priori proposition. These are terms, definitions, and equations. These propositions are, for the most part, not overly useful because they are said to be arbitrary by philosophers. They call them tautologies. A tautology is something that's true by definition. I defined it that way, so it's true. And finally, they are called non-operational, which means they do not tell us anything new or interesting about reality, the real world. Okay? The second type of proposition we have is the analytic a posteriori proposition. There's nothing in that box. There are no analytic a priori propositions. Okay. Synthetic a posteriori propositions. Those are propositions in which the means of formal logic are necessary but not, are necessary but not sufficient in order to determine if a proposition is true or false. So that synthetic tells us we need logic, but it's not enough. We need something else. A posteriori tells us that something else is observation. So we need logic and observation in order to determine if a proposition is true or false. These types of things, these propositions, we call sense data. So for example, the background of this slide is blue. I need logic to tell me what a slide is, that slides have backgrounds, and that logic tells me that a background can be blue, but it could be blue, green, red, purple, or any other color. So I also need observation. Once I see the slide, I can put together slide, background, blue. Now, that background of that slide right now is blue. That is a synthetic a posteriori proposition. When philosophers talk about those, they say that their truth value is time and space dependent. That is only true at certain times and in certain places. Okay, I could change the color of this slide tomorrow and it could be red. So it's true today it was red, it was blue, but tomorrow it won't be true that it's blue because I'll have changed it to red. And finally, the last type of proposition, the controversial ones, supposedly, is the synthetic a priori proposition. This means synthetic means that this is a proposition in which the means of formal logic are necessary but not sufficient in order to determine if a proposition is true or false. A priori means that we do not need to observe it in order to determine it's true or false. So there's a problem there. Immanuel Kant said that we learn these things through introspection, thinking about a proposition, seeing if it's possible it could be false. If in trying to find a way for it to be false, that involves us in a performative contradiction, where we use something to deny its own existence, that is not true, therefore it must be true. These propositions are universal. They are true always and everywhere, now, then, and forever. And if you notice, I made an error. That should say true. Okay? Thank you very much. I tried to make this as short as I could. Bye-bye.